When it comes to understanding avoidant behavior, the most revealing moments are the quiet ones. It's not in what they say, it's in what they don't. The avoidance world is built in silence, in pauses that stretch a little too long, in the messages left unanswered, and the eyes that turn away when you try to look deeper. To unmask an avoidant without saying a word, you must first learn to listen to what's missing. Silence, for them, is not emptiness. It's communication. It's defense disguised as distance. You see, human beings are wired to seek connection through language. We crave words to confirm that we're seen, that we matter, that we belong. But the avoidant disrupts that rhythm. They speak a different dialect, one made of withdrawal, subtle shifts, and emotional delay. Every act of retreat carries meaning. Every evasion is a coded message. When they step back, they're not necessarily rejecting you. They're trying to control their vulnerability, to regulate an inner storm that words could never contain. That's the paradox of the avoidant. Their silence often hides more feeling than the most expressive speech ever could. They aren't cold, they're overwhelmed. They aren't indifferent, they're terrified of being consumed. But here's the truth most people miss. Avoidance is not about you, it's about fear. Fear of closeness, fear of being seen, fear that love will demand too much of them. When you learn to read beyond words, you begin to see the micro signals that reveal the avoidant's inner life. Watch how they pause before answering. Notice how their body shifts slightly away during emotionally charged conversations. Observe how they offer logic when emotion is required. They intellectualize feelings because emotions, to them, are dangerous territory. Every controlled gesture is an attempt to stay safe, not because you're unsafe, but because vulnerability once meant pain. If you're listening closely, you can feel the emotional current beneath their restraint. Their silence vibrates with the tension between wanting to connect and needing to escape. When an avoidant says, "I'm fine," what they often mean is, "I'm scared." When they disappear, they're not abandoning you. They're protecting themselves from what closeness might awaken. It's not personal, it's protective. But here's the challenge: most people react to avoidance by pushing harder, by demanding words, explanations, reassurance. But they want the avoidant to speak when speech itself feels unsafe. That pressure only deepens their withdrawal. The more you chase, the further they retreat. It's not because they don't care, it's because they can't regulate the emotional intensity that comes with being pursued. So, if you want to unmask them, stop chasing. Observe instead. Replace reaction with reflection. The real insight comes when you shift from asking, "Why won't they talk?" to, "What are they communicating through their silence?" Because they are communicating constantly. Their distance tells a story. Their timing speaks volumes. Their avoidance is a language, and once you understand it, you no longer take it as rejection. You recognize it as fear speaking softly. There's something deeply philosophical about this, the idea that silence itself can be a truth teller. In many ways, the avoidant embodies the ancient paradox of human connection, the longing to be known and the terror of being known at once. We all wear masks to some degree. The avoidant simply wears theirs tighter. But if you can learn to hear the music beneath their pauses, the rhythm of hesitation, the cadence of retreat, you'll start to see the humanity inside the armor. And that's the shift. You move from frustration to understanding, from "Why are they ignoring me?" to "What pain are they protecting?" That's empathy at its highest form. Not sympathy, not enabling, but awareness. Awareness that what looks like indifference is often survival. So, the next time someone withdraws, resist the urge to fill the silence. Don't chase, don't demand, don't decode with words. Observe with presence. Because presence is the one thing avoidance can't defend against. When you stop talking and start seeing, you invite truth to reveal itself naturally. Silence isn't always absence. Sometimes it's the most honest form of communication there is. And when you learn to listen to silence, really listen, you don't just unmask the avoidant, you awaken your own capacity to perceive without control, to understand without words, to love without fear. Because sometimes the loudest truths are the ones never spoken. Let's talk about armor, not the kind made of steel or iron, but the kind we build around our emotions. Avoidants wear it well. You can't always see it, but you can feel it. It's in their calm tone when things should feel emotional. It's in their insistence on needing space right when the relationship starts to deepen. That's not arrogance. That's armor. And like all armor, it wasn't crafted overnight. It was forged through experience, through pain, through the quiet lessons life teaches us when love becomes a source of fear instead of safety. Here's the truth: avoidant behavior is never random. It's structured. It's protective. It's a psychological design built from early emotional injuries, moments when connection brought more pain than comfort. Somewhere in their story, being open wasn't rewarded, it was punished. So they learn to self-soothe through distance, to control what they can, to feel safe by staying just far enough away. Attachment theory helps us see this clearly. The dismissive, avoidant leans on self-sufficiency as a survival strategy. They tell themselves, I don't need anyone. It's not pride, it's protection. The fearful avoidant, on the other hand, wants closeness, but believes it will inevitably lead to pain. So they oscillate between desire and defense, connection and retreat. The pattern looks confusing from the outside, but inside it makes perfect sense. It's the brain trying to reconcile two conflicting truths. I need love and love hurts me. And that's what makes avoidance so misunderstood. People label avoidance as cold, emotionally unavailable, incapable of love. But that's not accurate. They are capable, profoundly so. But love feels like exposure. It threatens the illusion of control. Vulnerability opens a door to uncertainty, and uncertainty is unbearable for someone whose emotional world was once unpredictable. Their calm detachment is not apathy, it's an emotional lockdown, a way to keep chaos from flooding back in. Here's where it gets interesting and human. Most avoidants don't even realize they're wearing armor. It's become their second skin. They mistake distance for peace, solitude for strength. But it's not strength. It's survival dressed up as self-control. When you look closely, that I don't care energy isn't confidence, it's exhaustion. They're tired of getting close just to get hurt again. Now, if you've ever been close to someone avoidant, you know how frustrating this feels. You start questioning yourself. Did I do something wrong? Why won't they open up? But that's the trap. The moment you take their distance personally, you step into the same emotional battlefield they're fighting on, and you lose clarity. The goal isn't to force their walls down. It's to understand why those walls exist in the first place. Because when you understand the why, compassion replaces resentment. There's also a philosophical layer to this. Avoidance isn't just about attachment. It's about identity. If you've survived by staying hidden, your armor becomes part of who you think you are. Taking it off feels like losing yourself. Imagine telling someone, it's safe now, when their entire nervous system has been trained to believe otherwise. It's not that simple. Growth for the avoidant doesn't start with trust, it starts with awareness. The awareness that safety is possible, That connection doesn't always have to mean surrender. But here's the key. You can't do that work for them. You can only model what safety looks like. You can stay grounded when they pull away. You can communicate clearly without chasing. You can show that intimacy doesn't have to be overwhelming. It can be spacious, calm, and free. The more you hold that energy, the more their armor begins to crack, not because you forced it, but because they finally see it's no longer needed. It's easy to judge avoidance from the outside. It's harder to see it for what it truly is, a brilliant, adaptive strategy that once kept someone emotionally alive. But what once protected them now imprisons them. That's the tragedy of avoidance. The armor that kept them safe now keeps them alone. And maybe that's the lesson for all of us. We all wear some form of armor. We all hide behind composure, intellect, humor, or business to protect the tender parts of ourselves. The difference is awareness. Awareness allows you to choose when to take the armor off. Avoidants aren't broken. They're just afraid. And fear loses its power the moment it's met with understanding. So if you want to unmask the avoidant, stop trying to force emotion out of them. See the armor, respect it, but also know that beneath it is someone who once wanted love so badly, they learned to fear it. Because at the end of the day, avoidance isn't the absence of emotion. It's the echo of a heart that once felt too much. The greatest paradox of the avoidant is this: they crave connection, yet connection terrifies them. They want love, they want intimacy, but when it gets too close, something in their system sounds an alarm. A deep, primal warning that says, run. And they do. Not because they don't care, not because they've stopped feeling, but because closeness awakens an old, buried fear, one they can't control and can barely explain. When you get close to an avoidant, you're not just meeting the person they are today. You're meeting the echoes of every moment when love once felt unsafe. Maybe it was the parent who pulled away when they needed comfort. Maybe it was inconsistency, the kind that teaches a child to expect disappointment more than affection. Over time, the nervous system adapts. It learns that love is unpredictable, and unpredictability equals pain. So, as adults, they try to manage that pain by controlling the one thing they can distance. And here's the thing, to the avoidant, distance feels like safety. It's their version of emotional regulation. Where most people feel secure through connection, the avoidant feels secure through separation. It's how they calm the nervous system, how they maintain a sense of control. When someone gets too close, it doesn't feel like warmth, it feels like pressure. It feels like they're losing the air they need to breathe. So they pull away. But the cruel irony is that avoidance doesn't bring peace, it brings emptiness. The very space they create to feel safe becomes the space that keeps them lonely. They build walls to prevent pain, but those walls also block love, joy, and belonging. They long to be close, but can't stand the exposure that comes with closeness. It's a silent tug of war that drains them and confuses everyone around them. From the outside, you might see this as inconsistency, hot and cold, come here and go away, emotional one day, detached the next. But what's really happening is internal chaos. Their system is fighting itself. One part wants love, the other fears it. It's like trying to hold fire. Beautiful and dangerous at the same time. That's why you can't take their retreat personally. It's not about you. It's about the emotional fire they've never learned to hold without burning. If you've ever loved an avoidant, you know this cycle well. You feel the warmth of connection, only for it to vanish when things start to deepen. It's disorienting. You start asking, what changed? But the truth is, nothing changed except proximity. The closer you get, the more their survival instincts activate. What feels natural to you? Intimacy, reassurance, openness feels overwhelming to them. It's not rejection, it's self-preservation. Understanding this doesn't mean tolerating emotional unavailability or accepting unhealthy dynamics. It means seeing the human being beneath the behavior. The avoidant isn't rejecting love. They're rejecting vulnerability, and in their mind, vulnerability equals danger. The path to growth isn't through confrontation, it's through creating emotional safety, both for them and for yourself. That's how change begins, not through force, but through calm, consistent presence. There's a psychological depth here that's worth acknowledging. Every time an avoidant runs from love, they're reinforcing a subconscious belief. I'm safer alone. But loneliness is not safety, it's stagnation. It's a controlled environment where nothing can hurt them, but nothing can heal them either. The tragedy is that many avoidants never realize this until the isolation starts to ache louder than the fear. And by then, they've trained the people around them to stop reaching out. Philosophically, it's fascinating because it mirrors a human truth we all face, that love requires surrender, and surrender requires courage. To be seen, you must risk being misunderstood. To be loved, you must risk being hurt. The avoidant simply hasn't learned how to live with that risk yet. They equate love with danger instead of growth. But when avoidance meets awareness, transformation becomes possible. For the avoidant, healing starts when they stop running from the very thing they want. It begins when they realize that safety isn't found in isolation. It's found in the right connection. And for those who love them, the most powerful thing you can do is stand steady. Don't chase, don't withdraw. Hold your emotional center. Your calm is what teaches them that love doesn't have to consume them. It can coexist with freedom. Because here's the hard truth. Love will always feel unsafe until you decide to let it in anyway. Fear doesn't disappear before you open up. It dissolves as you open up. That's how courage works. And maybe that's the message we all need, avoidant or not. If you're always waiting to feel completely safe before you love, you'll wait forever. At some point, you have to take the risk. You have to let closeness happen, even when every instinct says retreat. Because love isn't about avoiding fear, it's about walking through it, hand in hand with someone who understands. Here's the part that's hardest for most people to accept. The avoidant in your life isn't just revealing who they are. They're revealing something about you. Every person who triggers you is, in some way, a mirror. They reflect back what still needs to be healed, what still hurts, what you still run from. And the avoidant in particular has a way of exposing the parts of you that crave closeness yet fear rejection, that seek control yet long for surrender. They don't just test your patience. They test your self-awareness. We tend to see avoidance as an external problem, something happening to us. But what if it's actually something happening for us? Every interaction with an avoidant personality forces you to confront your own attachment patterns. Why do you keep chasing someone who's pulling away? Why does their silence make you anxious? Why do you interpret distance as a lack of worth? Those reactions aren't random, they're data. They're emotional fingerprints left by your own early experiences with love and safety. The avoidant triggers something ancient in you. If you lean anxious, their withdrawal ignites your deepest fear. That love will always leave. If you lean avoidant yourself, their distance might feel oddly familiar, almost comfortable. Either way, the dynamic isn't just relational. It's reflective. You're not just trying to connect with them. You're trying to reconcile with your own emotional history. This is where relationships become the most powerful classroom we'll ever have. Every time you feel rejected, every time you overthink or overreach, you're being invited to look inward instead of outward. The avoidant silence isn't just their coping mechanism. It's your invitation to stop seeking validation from someone who's afraid to give it, and start cultivating it within yourself. It's humbling when you realize how much of our pain in relationships isn't about the other person's behavior. It's about our interpretation of it. We tell stories, we create meaning. They pulled away, so I must not be enough. They didn't respond, so they don't care. But maybe, just maybe, it's not about your worth at all. Maybe it's about their fear, their wiring, their trauma. When you take it personally, you make their fear about your inadequacy, and that's where you lose power. The moment you stop personalizing their distance, you start reclaiming your emotional center. Now, here's where it gets uncomfortable but liberating. We're all avoidants in some way. We all avoid something: intimacy, vulnerability, honesty, responsibility, even self-reflection. The avoidant just makes our avoidance visible. They become the mirror that forces us to see what we've been running from. That's why the connection feels magnetic. It's not just attraction, it's recognition. It's your subconscious saying, here's a chance to heal what's unfinished. Philosophically, this is fascinating. The people we struggle with most are often our greatest teachers. They show us the edges of our emotional capacity. They expose the conditions we place on love, the parts of us that say, I'll be okay only if they choose me. But true emotional freedom begins when you realize your peace doesn't depend on someone else's availability. It depends on your ability to stay grounded, even in the face of their withdrawal. So, what do you do when you recognize this mirror? You stop chasing. You stop trying to fix, prove, or convince. Instead, you reflect. You ask yourself, what is this situation trying to show me about me? Maybe it's showing you that you equate love with pursuit. Maybe it's showing you that you're addicted to potential, to trying to earn the love that should have been freely given. Once you see that pattern clearly, you have a choice: repeat it or release it. When you stop reacting from your wounds, the dynamic shifts. You're no longer caught in their push-pull cycle. You start moving differently, calmer, wiser, more centered. And ironically, that's when the avoidant often starts to soften. Why? Because your stillness disarms their defenses. You're no longer playing the old game of chase and retreat. You've stepped out of the emotional loop, and that shift changes everything. This is why awareness is so powerful. It's the first step toward liberation. The avoidant may or may not change, but you can, and when you do, their behavior loses its power to define your worth. That's when healing happens. Not when they come closer, but when you do. When you come closer to your truth, your boundaries, your peace. The avoidant may never say, I'm scared, but you can say, I see you and I see me. That's what it means to unmask not just them, but yourself, to see how your patterns dance with theirs, and to choose a new rhythm. Because sometimes, the person who triggers your deepest pain isn't your punishment. They're your mirror, reflecting the exact part of you that's finally ready to heal. When you're dealing with someone avoidant, your natural instinct is to react. You want to reach out, to clarify, to fix whatever went wrong. You feel the distance and it stings, so you fill the silence with words, explanations, and apologies that were never asked for. But here's the truth. Every time you chase, you reinforce their need to run. Every time you react, you validate their fear that closeness means losing control. The real power, the real transformation, begins not when you do more, But when you do less, it begins in stillness. Stillness is not passivity. It's not giving up or withdrawing emotionally. It's emotional self-mastery, the ability to hold your center when everything in you wants to reach out. For someone who's wired to overgive or overexplain, stillness feels unnatural at first. It feels like you're losing control, when in fact, you're reclaiming it. You're taking back the energy you've been pouring into trying to decode, predict, or rescue someone who is running from their own emotions. Here's why stillness matters. Avoidants thrive on space. It's their safety mechanism. When you rush to fill the silence, you invade that space and confirm their subconscious fear. That closeness equals pressure. But when you hold still, when you resist the urge to fix, something shifts. They start to feel your calm. And for the first time, they realize that closeness doesn't have to mean chaos. Your non-reaction becomes a silent invitation for trust. Psychologically, this is powerful. It flips the dynamic. Instead of being the pursuer, you become the anchor. You stop matching their avoidance with anxiety. You begin responding, not reacting. And that change in energy is often what begins to unmask the avoidant's real emotions. Because beneath their detachment, they're watching you closely. They notice how you handle distance. They notice if your love depends on their participation, or if you can hold steady without needing constant reassurance. When you stay still, you communicate something profound without saying a word, "I can love you, but I can also survive," without your validation. That's what safety feels like to an avoidant. Not intensity, not pressure, but consistency. Stillness shows them that intimacy doesn't have to mean invasion. It's not about proving your worth through pursuit. It's about embodying peace, even when they retreat. But let's be honest, stillness isn't easy. It takes emotional discipline. It means sitting in discomfort, resisting the urge to interpret their silence as rejection. It means not sending the text, not crafting the perfect explanation, not begging for closure. You don't suppress your feelings, you observe them. You feel the fear, the confusion, the longing, and you choose not to let them dictate your actions. That's strength. Philosophically, stillness is a kind of rebellion. We live in a world addicted to reaction, instant replies, constant validation, endless noise. Stillness cuts through that. It's a statement that says, I will not let someone else's avoidance control my peace. It's choosing to meet detachment with dignity. And that's where real power lives, not in control, but in self-regulation. When you practice stillness, you also begin to see more clearly. You notice the patterns, not just theirs, but yours. You see how much of your own behavior is driven by fear. Fear of being forgotten, fear of being unloved, fear that silence means you don't matter. But when you sit with that fear instead of running from it, you dissolve its power. You stop needing someone else to prove your worth. You become your own source of stability. And something beautiful happens when you reach that point. The avoidance distance stops feeling like a threat. It becomes information. It tells you where they are emotionally, without you having to chase clarity. You stop reacting to their fear and start responding to your truth. Sometimes that response means staying, other times it means walking away. But either way, you're no longer moving from desperation. You're moving from strength. That's the essence of stillness. It teaches you that peace isn't found in their return, it's found in your restraint. You can hold compassion for their fear without collapsing under it. You can love them without losing yourself. Because when you master stillness, you stop participating in the cycle that keeps both of you stuck. So, the next time someone withdraws, don't fill the silence. Let it breathe. Let it reveal. Let it teach you what words can't. Because sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. Not out of indifference, but out of wisdom. Stillness is strength. It's the quiet confidence that says, I don't need to chase peace. I am peace. When you finally look past the avoidance defenses, past the silence, the withdrawal, the calm mask they wear so convincingly, you start to see something profoundly human underneath it all. You see fear, yes, but you also see longing. You see someone who's not trying to be difficult, but who's exhausted from always having to protect themselves. You start to see that what they call independence is often isolation, and what looks like control is really survival. When you stop reacting to the armor and start seeing the soul underneath, everything changes. Avoidants don't build their walls to shut people out. They build them to keep pain in. They've learned that if they contain their emotions tightly enough, they won't get hurt again. But that containment comes at a cost: numbness. They feel safer, but they also feel less alive. And here's where the deeper truth lies. You can't selectively numb pain without also numbing joy. You can't mute fear and still fully experience love. Emotional suppression doesn't discriminate. It silences everything. So when you unmask the avoidant, not through confrontation, not through analysis, but through quiet understanding, you're actually helping them remember who they were before the fear took over. That version of them still exists, buried under layers of control and caution. They may not show it, but it's there. The part that wants to trust, that wants to love freely, that wants to believe connection can be safe again. And this isn't just about them. It's about you too, because seeing someone beyond their defenses teaches you how to see yourself beyond yours. It reminds you that everyone, at their core, is just trying to feel safe, some through closeness, some through distance. The point isn't to judge the difference, it's to understand it. When you can do that, when you can meet someone's fear with compassion instead of resistance, you become a safe place in a world that keeps teaching people to hide. That's the real work, not to fix, not to diagnose, but to witness, to hold space for someone's humanity without losing your boundaries in the process. True empathy doesn't mean sacrificing yourself to save them. It means standing firm in your own peace while allowing them to exist exactly as they are. That balance is what breaks cycles. It's what heals more than words ever could. We tend to think of unmasking as exposing, like pulling something away to reveal the truth underneath. But when it comes to the avoidant, unmasking isn't about exposure. It's about safety. The mask falls not when you demand honesty, but when they feel seen without judgment, the moment they realize they can exist in their full, flawed humanity without being chased, criticized, or controlled. That's when they start to open. Philosophically, this is powerful because it touches on something universal. Every human being is wearing a mask to some degree. We all present versions of ourselves that we believe are safer than the truth. The avoidant simply learned to make that mask their identity. But when you meet someone at the level of their soul, without trying to rip off the mask, you create a kind of permission. The permission to be real. And that's the one thing every person, avoidant or not, truly craves. Seeing the soul beneath the mask requires patience and emotional maturity. It requires you to let go of the idea that love should always look like closeness or constant communication. Sometimes love looks like space. Sometimes it's the quiet respect of knowing when to lean back. Sometimes it's the courage to stop needing their vulnerability to validate your own. That's when the relationship, whether romantic, familial, or otherwise, moves from codependence to consciousness. And that consciousness changes how you see everyone. You stop labeling people as emotionally unavailable or too much. You start realizing that everyone's behavior makes sense once you understand their story. You begin to see that most defenses are just disguised forms of pain. That awareness doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it gives you perspective. And perspective gives you power. Power not to control others, but to choose how you respond. Power to lead with understanding instead of anger. Power to love without losing yourself. When you reach that point, you stop trying to unmask people forcefully. You realize that the real transformation happens when you make yourself the kind of person others feel safe to be unmasked around. Because the truth is, the avoidant doesn't need to be fixed. They need to be seen. Just like you. Just like all of us. And maybe that's the point of this whole journey. Learning to see beyond behavior, beyond fear, beyond defense, into the shared humanity that connects us all. Because when you can see the soul beneath the mask, you stop trying to change people and start inspiring them to remove their armor on their own.